Hello there. Are you up for a week-long trip into the strange and bizarre world of the unexplained? We've compiled a collection of films that will make you tremble in terror, scratch your head in confusion, and laugh out loud in astonishment. So sit back, relax, and prepare to go on this adventure. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications if you don't want to miss a single frightening, puzzling, or humorous moment. Story 1. I was an ugly kid with no friends. Not in middle school, not for most of high school. I was just a wide-jawed, squinty-eyed, big-boned monstrosity of a child who developed mommy issues because she'd put me down in front of other people. Well, I grew into that strong jaw pretty well, grew to be 6-foot-something and broad-shouldered, and my foxy eyes turned out to be my biggest asset. I have tons of confidence these days, but since I lost a decade of developing social skills, my confidence is almost entirely based on my looks. I'll spend an hour sitting and staring into a mirror before going out some nights. I'll eat in front of a mirror. I'll smile at myself, laugh at made-up jokes, just to be sure that everything checks out image-wise. I tend to be very popular nowadays, and I make more friends than I can keep up with, because I spent so much of my developmental years alone and awkward. I worry that everyone can see the residue of that. I agonize over every little social interaction for 30 seconds following it. All of my body language, even the way I sit, has been hastily but carefully considered. Every time I open my mouth, I feel like I'm about to dive into the deep end of a pool. I can't swim, and I'm always surprised when people respond positively to anything I say. I'm an engaged and thoughtful and appreciative conversationalist because I feel like I have to be just to get by. But ironically, people love that. It's not 100% paranoia either. Deep down, I really am still that awkward, lonely kid who no one wants to talk to, and that kid will show himself randomly. Like, I'll be on a date with some hot wannabe Instagram model, and the last thing she wants to talk about is the 37th President of the United States, Richard M. Nixon. But we just passed Milhouse Street, and did you know that Nixon's middle name was Milhouse? I wonder what he'd think about the dress you're wearing. You know, he used to wear a windbreaker and dress shoes, even on the beach. There's a lot of self-awareness here. I'm just thinking about him, or her, this person, looking in a mirror and just watching himself be sociable, because that's what they do with every portrayal of a serial unaliver, like Dexter or anything else, or even American Psycho. They have that little interaction just so you know that they're so self-involved that they're up to nefarious intent. It's probably not going to happen with this guy, right? Story 2. Pretty much what you'd expect. Lots of not very good, not very long relationships. Puberty came very late for me, but with many physical gifts. My frizzy hair became shiny curls. My somewhat globular figure became a knockout bod. I was still so insecure and lonely, I would jump into things too quickly or get so turned off the whole thing and spent years single, when I now realized there was plenty of good guys out there had I made the effort. Most of the time, I went out with guys who came on pretty strong and showered me with affection at first. These guys coveted me when they met me, but weren't that interested in really being all that nice to me in the long run. In retrospect, I think I was like a prize to win, a manic pixie dream girl. I think when they figured out I was a real person with needs, wants, ideas, and ambitions of my own, their interest cooled. Usually, these guys didn't break it off with me. Several even told me outright it was because they couldn't imagine doing better than me, even if they weren't that into it. They just got more and more distant and difficult, and eventually I had to do the dirty work myself. Interestingly, I would say my husband is in the same category as I am. Traditionally attractive, but socially awkward, though he was never an ugly duckling at all. In his case, It seems he never got the memo about being handsome and doesn't even really understand what traditionally attractive is for either gender. He finds me beautiful and attractive, but doesn't have a type at all. He doesn't even seem to understand that there are rules as to what people generally consider to be attractive. He goes on an individual basis. All his girlfriends, including me, basically had to make all the moves to make things happen. I even proposed to him. Do you think this points out a difference between male and female attractiveness? That guys don't have to do as much as girls would do to make themselves feel attractive or attract people? I kind of think it is. Guys, there's always the joke that girls have to go through all these products and put on makeup and everything in the morning, and guys just have to be clean and comb their hair. Maybe it's not, but what do you think? Story 3. I'm physically attractive. I'm fit, tall, young. I'm active and healthy. I dress very well and make sure everything fits perfectly that I wear. People often ask me if I'm a model, especially when I wear a suit. People tell me all the time I look like a Ralph Lauren model. Someone like that gets all the women, right? Nope. I'm very shy and a very boring person. My only interests are golf, and I'm not trying to pick up old, perverted, closeted gay men, especially because I'm very much straight. I go to the gym and keep to myself. If I'm not at work, I'm going home to most likely play video games because I have no one else to do activities or things with. People will talk to me, and I have a very blank palate and can't hold a conversation to save my life. I have no idea how to talk to people. I'll check girls out. They'll check me out. But that's about it, because if I approached them, I wouldn't be able to talk more than hello. I do a lot of activities solo because I'm very spontaneous, and the few friends I do have wouldn't be able to keep up with me or will just slow me down. I haven't had a girlfriend in years because I'm very socially awkward. Going to a bar and hooking up with someone is pretty easy when you have alcohol going through you and everyone around you, but I want a partner, not a one-night stand who's only interested because we're both mutually frisky and drunk. I can honestly say that looks open doors. Talking gets you through them. I can only open the doors. Again, very self-reflective here. A very big amount of self-awareness. It's kind of good that sort of he knows where he stands. Do you think that he probably doesn't do a lot for his friends? He doesn't think they'll reciprocate? It sounds like he's saying they couldn't keep up with me. Maybe you do something to try and be on their level, to do something for your friends. Do you think he's being a little self-centered here? Story 4. I'm an exceptionally bad conversationalist. I can't do small talk at all. It's prematurely ended a lot of potential relationships for me. It's a bit of a depressing cycle. At this point, I'm very used to attracting women based on my physical appearance, and then having them ghost out after a few days or weeks because I come off as if I have no personality. No one's ever been honest enough to just outright tell me that I'm boring, and I don't know if I appreciate the politeness or resent it. In reality, I like to think that I'm a pretty entertaining and interesting person. I'm an extreme introvert, and it takes me an exceptionally long time to open up to people. The only people I'm ever myself around are family that I've grown up with all my life, or a few close friends that I've known for years. To those people, I'm a cut-up, life-of-the-party type, hopefully witty and easy to talk to. To everyone else, I'm the quiet guy. If they go out of their way to get to know me, I come off as distant and standoffish. For the ones that are interested enough to fight through that, they see that after a few weeks or months, I'm still pretty closed off. Most people give up after that. Relationship-wise, I feel like I have a lot to offer, but my social awkwardness constantly sabotages it. I just never know what to say. I think too hard about what I'm going to say, and all too often it results in me not saying anything. Story 5. When I was a kid, sports were my escape from a confusing social structure that I didn't really understand. Just hanging out with people, I didn't know what to expect from people or what was expected from me, so I avoided it. However, when I was playing a sport, I knew exactly what was going on. I especially took to swimming because it was a solitary sport and I loved the water. When I was mid-race, it was like I was by myself. That, of course, means that I got into ridiculously good shape and trained myself to work out as a response to stress. Where some people would eat more when they got awkward, I would just go to the gym and build up a nice adrenaline high to burn the stress away. The end result is that while I was still the same awkward and shy guy that I used to be, I was in fantastic shape. I've since slowly gotten less awkward, mostly by using physical activities of various kinds to ease myself into social situations. However, I'm still pretty shy and have a tendency to still get a bit awkward in social settings. However, I'm more swole now than ever, and I'm still exercising almost every day. I feel a level of privacy and self-satisfaction during a good workout that can't be matched by anything else. Story 6. My wife. Oh man. She's a reasonably attractive woman, 40, well put together, and super charming and funny. She's so awkward, though. She's like a personification of that awkward penguin meme. Someone, good afternoon. My wife, good. You? Followed by 2-second pause, then embarrassed giggling. For a woman as cute as she is, she's never been able to do a spicy thing in her life on purpose. She always stops mid-attempt and just starts giggling like she's 8, and someone said the word penis. We'll be out and dudes are constantly flirting with her and she's completely oblivious. We don't wear wedding rings, and if I leave her alone for a minute, someone will be chatting with her and she just has no idea what's going on. She's constantly being checked out and is totally in the dark. It's literally the only way I was able to get her because she's so oblivious to how cute and charming she can be. She's just too awkward to know better. And if any of you fill her in on my scam, it's your butt. My girlfriend is roughly the same. She doesn't giggle, but she is attractive and people hit on her all the time and she just doesn't realize. So she just acts super nice to them. Infinite loop. This sounds like the kind of trope, Bo Burnham sang about it in a song once, that guys want a girl who's really attractive and hot, but they don't really know it. So that they kind of feel safe that even if guys are hitting on her, she doesn't know what to do in those situations. I do think it's kind of a male ego thing that they'll feel safe, but still get the hot girl. I don't think that's kind of that fair. What do you think? Story 7. This is a good one for me. I am a tall, classically handsome man. Genetics win. I'm also diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And sometimes it can be hard for me to be social. Genetics fail. Anyway, I think the moral of the story here is physically attractive people can get away with being socially awkward because people are automatically more interested in talking to someone that's attractive. Because of this, the cycle continues. I try to work on social interactions, but have never had to focus on becoming better because I have a buffer. There are bad sides. I really focus on being nice, and people take this the wrong way. I currently have a stalker. Bummer. I've led people on romantically, especially in my youth, because I have trouble reading social cues, and my anxiety/depression sometimes makes me think that there's no way someone is actually interested in me. Definitely a blessing and a curse. The blessings are I modeled in college, so no school debt. Getting a first date is easier. For all those people who are physically attractive but don't want to be, I have some wise words from Mean Girls for you. You're a regulation hottie. Own it. This is so true. Fake it till you make it. Story 9. As a preteen and teen, I was not cute. I went through that awkward, chubby phase and just didn't know how to work with my curly hair and was teased a lot. No boys liked me, and PE sucked because I was the slow, chubby girl, and I was in the RSP program to top it off. The RSP damaged me the most, and I still have a sort of complex about it. Then, like freaking magic, when I turned 18, the baby fat melted off. I knew how I wanted to look, and suddenly I was considered beautiful and a stunner. My head never caught up with that, making me low-hanging desperate fruit until I managed to get married, twice before the age of 26. So I'm still painfully shy and see myself as mentally handicapped in some way. So I consistently choose jobs where I can sort of hide from people or require more physical work. I start a new job with a lot of customer interaction tomorrow, and I'm absolutely terrified of dealing with people because I think I seem odd. During the first marriage, I didn't work at all and hid myself away like a hermit, but he also was insecure and felt more secure if I was home. Story 1. The story of the unaliving room. I grew up in an old farmhouse, 2 floors and a basement. The basement was creepy as hell anyway because it had rickety wood slat stairs, stone walls, was dimly lit in an L shape with dark corners, and had, I kid you not, a single hanging light bulb around one of the corners. Oh, and the spiders. So many spiders and cobwebs. And these spiders turn bright white when they perish for some godforsaken reason. Anyway, at the back of the basement, it always seemed cut short. So one day, my brother and I decided to search under our old back porch that was overgrown with weeds at the time. And we found a door to another room that had been walled off from the rest of the basement. Well, door is probably an overstatement. It was kind of a hanging half door made with weathered 2x4s with big metal hinges. It wouldn't move when we tried to open it, so for years we jokingly referred to it as the unaliving room, daring friends to go inside, which no one would, of course, and the legend grew. What could be in this room? If it was for storage, why would it be walled off from the rest of the basement? Eventually, we could lift the door ever so slightly, but it was pitch dark inside, and when my big brother pushed me in one day, our mom would end up telling us to stop messing around back there, that the old door was dangerous if it swung down on us, and she didn't want us playing back there anymore. Of course, this only made the interest grow, but while freaking out, I had made a discovery while inside. Even though I couldn't see, the floor was made of dirt. What the heck was going on? One day, our mom had the old carpets thrown out and finally fixed the wood floors under them like she always wanted to. Eventually, while cleaning out a tiny closet under some stairs, I noticed some of the boards made a distinctive square. It's right over the unaliving room. I pulled the square and saw the same dirt floor I felt years before. My girlfriend and I ventured inside and found a small chair and a child's school desk. Take it as you will, I guess, but it freaked us out. Later, I found out many buildings in our town were linked to the Underground Railroad. Take it as you will, but that was the story of the unaliving room. Spiders turning white will be one of 2 things. 1, there's some fungi that infect spiders, cordyceps style. 2, way more common, is that when they grow, spiders shed their exoskeletons and leave behind an empty spidery shell of the old skeleton. That may well look white as it's now empty of spiders. Ugh. I have no idea. It looks like the mystery of this room was a little bit bigger than what it actually was. It was still kind of creepy to see a single desk and a dirt floor in this kind of room. But if this was linked to the Underground Railroad, then it's definitely served a better purpose than being an unaliving room. Story 2. Finally, something I can answer here. We had been living in the house that I still live in for about 2 years when I went to use the bathroom in the basement, and as I went to sit on the toilet, a huge bit of the wall fell on me. Nothing big enough to hurt or anything, of course. I nearly pooped myself out of fear, pulled my pants up, and was gone. Got my dad, and when we looked in there, it was a bunch of old books and, building stuff. Fast forward a few months later, my dad is gone on a trip, and it's just me, my mom, and my sister at the house. We had all gone out that day and were gone the whole day. We came back home and found our front door completely destroyed by our dog. She had scratched off all the paint and even messed up some of the wood underneath. We were a bit weirded out because she's a really good dog and doesn't do stuff like that. But my mom told me it was nothing and she probably just had to go to the bathroom. Anyway, later that night I was checking the whole house, which is something I did every night due to me being an incredibly paranoid person. So I went to check the basement, and I kid you not, the door to the bathroom door was completely open, which we always keep shut because we didn't want the cats or door in there. And the wall to the secret room had been moved to the side, and the light in the room was on. I go to get my mom and tell her everything, and of course we're all very scared. All the females in my family are on the small side, and we live in Germany, so guns in the house aren't very common, so basically no easy way to defend ourselves. Luckily, we have a cop friend who we call, and he comes and checks the whole house, but finds no one. After he's done with the house, he checks the front door and the lock. Looked like it had been messed with, along with the inside of the door part. Nothing ended up happening, but someone was 100% in our house that day. Very spooky. And we all slept with baseball bats next to us that night. He still lives in the house? If someone did break into their house, it sounds like the whatever was inside that room kind of protected the family and sort of took care of the unwanted guest. I'm thinking that's more you got a guard dog versus of a ghost that's protecting you or something. I'd say be glad. And unless no one's gone missing, yeah, it's still kind of hard to forget. Story 3. After 15 years, we found a secret basement in our farmhouse. My father had removed one of the large rocks that makes up the basement wall. I crawled under the log frame a few feet, and there was a wall made of baseball-sized rocks. I knocked those down and entered an old root cellar. There were shelves and shattered mason jars, and bones. Lots and lots of bones. We dug a tunnel so we could access the room. Found many secret areas in my current house behind wood panels. First secret door was in the basement. It led to an underground bomb shelter with separate air intake and water line. I knew of it prior to buying the home, and it was a major selling point for me. Stocked with a radiation detector used for storage. Second room was only 3 feet high, had a light, a bunch of toys, crayons, and drawings. That one I didn't find for a few months. After about 2 weeks, I discovered a few hidden panels with shelves with toys, magazines, books, and some clothing. Nothing interesting. After a year or two, I located a suspicious wood panel on the floor, pried it open a bit, and was able to see a full-length staircase leading to a brick wall. I haven't bothered to fully open the panel yet. Imagine being so jaded in all the secret rooms you found during your life that you don't bother seeing what's behind the brick wall at the end of the secret staircase. Dizzying lives you all lead. Are these all from one person, or was this just a common thread that was responding to the first one? If this person is finding all of these secret rooms, they need to rent themselves out to some sort of realtor to kind of root out hidden areas before they can really get a true listing of the house they're going to sell. If this is all one person, they'd make a big profit off of that. Story 4. So I lived in a Medicean village just outside Florence during my high school years, boarding school, and the place was obviously filled up with secret passages and rooms. Half of the place was actually locked up for safety/protection reasons. I got the chance to see the keys room. Only the keys master was allowed in, and the amount of keys was massive. Needless to say, the place was astounding and brimming with secrets. One day during my first year, while sleeping in the dormitories, we found a door about 50 to 60 centimeters tall just next to my friend's bed. It was frescoed like the walls, so not noticeable at first sight. It opened on a dark passage, which we later found out to be used by maids and servants back in the day. Still creepy to know there was a hidden passage, easily accessible, connecting all the bedrooms. We used to pull a lot of pranks on each other, but luckily no one used that passage. One other time, I was spending time in a passage room I thought I knew well. There were fake doors on both sides, or so I thought. Imagine the amazement when I pull the handle on one door and it actually opens up on a spiral staircase going up and down. It was pretty dark and I don't know what I was thinking of finding. Anyway, there were a couple of storage rooms, and going down it led to a closet in one of the classrooms downstairs. Easy way to sneak people upstairs, and up to the infirmary area on the 3rd floor. There was also a passage in one of the classrooms leading to a church outside. I've also heard of a mosaic room under the fountain in the garden, a passage leading to one of the major palaces in Florence, used by the Medici family to run away just in case, and I think I had found it, but I never had the courage to go in. Also found a secret washroom and many other things. I usually went exploring on Sunday morning. More than 10 years later, I still dream about exploring that place, and my subconscious has filled up the empty spaces with dreams and expectations. Story 5. There's a door in our bathroom, and it was just a small closet, and we put some cleaning supplies in it and didn't give it a second thought. Then one day we saw the door was open and thought the cat was in there. So I walked into the very tight space, and to my amazement, there was another door around the corner that you can't see just by looking straight in. It was slightly ajar, so I opened it, and it led behind the bathtub. And lo and behold, the cat is sitting in there chilling. I figure if God forbid we ever need it, it could be like a panic room. Build a throne for your cat so when someone else finds it, they just see your cat sitting on a throne. Story 6. I don't know if this counts, but I was a live-in nanny at one time, and the family and I would hear noises coming from the attic a lot. The mother would complain about missing beer, cigarettes, and dishes/silverware. An upstairs bookshelf would always be tilted and leaned up against the wall under the attic door. The mother thought the teen daughter was doing it. The kids and I thought the house was haunted. One night, the mother and kids were out of town, and I came home from my boyfriend's house pretty late. I heard the sink running upstairs and thought it was the ghosts. On my way up the stairs, a man appeared at the top of the stairs. I screamed my head off and ran to my room downstairs, locked the door, and called the police. Stayed in my room until the police got there. They found insulation from the attic in the sink. It turns out a homeless man had been living in the attic for months. We found dishes and cigarette butts up in the attic and empty beer bottles. He had been using the bookshelf to climb up into the attic. I was traumatized for a while. Well, I guess the story is that if there's homeless people that need a place to stay and can get away with getting up in the attic, try to pick a family that blames things on ghosts so they'll be left alone. Not too bad a temporary housing situation solution. Story 1. So, some backstory. Not a doctor, but really who is at this thread. In 6th grade, my best friend had his appendix burst in the middle of the night. After hearing about it, I was utterly terrified of it happening to me. My parents and doctors all told me it's relatively rare, and if it did happen, there really isn't anything to worry about. I asked what it felt like if it did happen, and they said, "Oh, you'll know." Yeah, thanks, really helpful. But my appendix bursting became somewhat of a phobia of mine over a decade. Every time I felt abdominal pain or severe gas, I always jumped to the conclusion of appendicitis. So about 10 years later, I'm hanging out with my friends when I start to feel some bad gas pressure coming on. Nothing too bad, but nothing would really make it go away. After I got home, it was still rather bad, but I figured I'd just sleep it off. Woke up at about 5 a.m., curled into a ball, throwing up in my pillow. At this point, I was still living at home with my parents, so I hobbled my way to their room and woke them, telling them I think my appendix was going. They told me, "It's probably gas, and are you really sure we should take you to the ER?" I told them I was sure it was my appendix, and they sort of told me to wait it out until 7 when they could phone the family doctor. So I curled into a ball in the bathroom and threw up for a few hours. At 7, on the nose, they called the doctor, and I described the symptoms, and the doc told my parents to take me to the ER now. So we get to the hospital, and I'm walking so hunched over, my face is almost at my knees. Bring me into the ER, and they order a CT scan. Think it was a CT, was kind of out of it, and put me on some kind of killer anti-nausea pain meds. The endoscopic surgeon comes in with my CT scan and tells me verbatim, "This is the most clear-cut case of appendicitis I have ever seen," and asks me to sign a release because he was going to film the operation, endoscopic bits at least, for training materials. So long story short, I had appendicitis, I knew it, and it was so clearly appendicitis that the doctor wanted to film it to teach other surgeons. So for any aspiring endoscopic surgeons in the thread, maybe you get to see inside me. Wow. Does that seem like every hypochondriac's dream to be proven so right that the doctors declare you a textbook example? I think this person was able to kind of, hopefully jokingly, hold it over his parents' heads for like years after that. Story 2. Not a doctor, but a chronic patient. I have a rare neurological disease that causes tumors to grow on the nervous systems and on any other type of body tissue, but the nervous system tumors are most common. I was diagnosed at age 4. I've been treated by the same clinic for over 25 years, having seen the same specialist for 20 of those years. The hospital where I'm treated is more than 3 hours away, but my local hospital is affiliated with them. I woke one morning with severe hip pain, swelling in my thigh, and a terrible limp. I went to my small-town ER, where I was told I had a skin infection. Doctor just visually examined me, ran no tests, and told me it was razor burn from shaving my bikini area. Was given an antibiotic. My disease is in my medical records, which the hospital had access to since it's the same medical facility, just different locations. 2 days later, the entire inside of my thigh had turned purple and blue. I couldn't walk without excruciating pain. I went to an express care, like a step down from the ER. They immediately sent me to the ER for symptoms of a blood clot. The on-call doctor notified the ER I was coming, demanding an ultrasound. I arrived back at the ER, where the ER doctor basically told me she wasn't ordering an ultrasound because it wouldn't find anything. Was told the bruising was self-induced to get pain pills, and that I was being discharged and blacklisted. My husband flipped and demanded an ultrasound, threatening legal action if not. Dumb doctor gave me attitude, but eventually ordered the scan. The ultrasound tech turned white as a ghost, quickly turned off the monitor and rushed to get the doctor. Turns out, I had a tumor the size of a 12-ounce soda can growing off a major nerve in my groin. I somehow strained the muscles around it, damaging my nerve and muscle. Never got an apology or admission of being wrong from the doctor. My specialist later told me she had a lot of fun talking with the ER doctor, with heavy sarcasm. It's sad that your husband needs to threaten legal action for you to be taken seriously, dang. I don't know if this one is so surprising to anyone except the ER doctor. This person, it says in the story, has been treated for over 25 years. I would think with all that time, she would be more in tune with her body and what her symptoms and her disease are than anybody else. Just another doctor who just thinks he knows better than anybody. Story 3. I'm no doctor, but this is something that happened to me. Earlier this year, I got sick. Seemed like the flu and felt absolutely horrible. Once I got healthy again, I started getting bruises for no reason and would get really easily winded just from brief exercise. I'm pretty in shape, so this was odd to me, and needless to say, concerning. Of course, I Googled what I was feeling, and WebMD was telling me I have cancer or a blood problem. Of course. I ended up seeing 4 different doctors who all told me that I'm paranoid and just need to relax. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Finally, the 5th doctor I saw said she'd give me a blood test to calm my nerves. And the next morning, I get a phone call in my dorm room saying that there's a bunch of things wrong and that I needed to go to the hospital. When I asked what that could mean, they told me I could have leukemia. Needless to say, the scariest moment of my life, as I'm only 20. Long story short, months of doctor's visits and eventually a bone marrow biopsy revealed I don't have cancer, but a rare blood disorder called aplastic anemia, which causes your bone marrow to stop making cells. I'm happy to say after extensive treatment, I'm doing well now, but it's very freaky to me that it took 5 different doctor's visits to finally hear me out when I felt something was wrong. I understand that these doctors probably deal with whiny people who exaggerate everything, but you can't get complacent when people's lives are on the line. Something should have immediately started ringing bells if you mentioned that you were getting winded with a little exercise and bruising easily. My goodness. Yeah, 5 doctors just to get a blood test. I would think that with the U.S., with everything going on with how we pay for our health care, you might have come across at least one doctor who would have just been happy just to get the extra money from doing a blood work or something, if not just to get the real answer. It's very messed up. Story 4. Not a doctor, but this happened to me. When I was 8, I was having severe headaches. Like it felt like someone was constantly stabbing me in the eye. My mom, who's an LNA, suspected it was nothing more than a sinus infection. She took me to the doctor to get checked out and get put on antibiotics, but they were adamant that it was not a sinus infection. They claimed I was too young to get one of those. For the next 2 weeks, I was in the hospital every day where they were running all sorts of tests trying to figure out what was wrong with me. They checked out my eyes, checked out my urine and blood, but couldn't find anything. The whole while still had severe headaches that were progressively getting worse. Finally, they suspected that I potentially could have a brain tumor. This scared the daylights out of me and my family, as my grandfather died of a brain tumor before I was born. They ran a CT scan to check, but they failed to find a tumor. What they did find out, however, was that my sinuses were severely inflamed. And I had a horrible case of sinusitis that needed antibiotics to treat. Once in antibiotics, I felt better within 5 days. After that, we started going to a different doctor. Too young for a sinus infection at 8. Wow, that's so insanely ridiculous they thought that wasn't a possibility. I had my first sinus surgery at 8 because I had chronic sinus infections and headaches for years. I then had another at 10, and last year I had one more at 27. I'm glad yours wasn't something worse at least. Story 5. Not a doctor. I had gallbladder problems some years back and went to the doctor. He said my blood work came back normal and that it was probably either indigestion or a sprained muscle. I told him I knew it wasn't. He asked me what I thought it was, so I told him I was certain it was my gallbladder and that it was full of stones. He told me, verbatim, "You're not middle-aged nor overweight, so it can't be that at all." I told him rather sternly to order the ultrasound because I was very certain he was wrong about what he thought it was. Half-hour later, I'm laying there getting the ultrasound done when the tech was all, "Yeah, so I'm not supposed to tell you anything, but I'm going to anyways. That is a fat sack of stones. I've never seen a gallbladder this bad before." My gallbladder was full of large and small stones. I cried and thanked him, then cried more because I was so angry with the doctor and the nurse practitioner and the previous nurse practitioner I saw a few months before that appointment for the same pain, who wrote it off as a strained muscle in my back. After the doctor saw the ultrasound, he came in with a nurse practitioner and 3 other nursing students to tell me I was right and to give them a lesson on listening to patients and to not just brush off their concerns and suggestions. Almost 2 weeks later, I was in for surgery. Good grief, this turned out longer than I expected. Good on that doctor for acknowledging his near mess-up. Story 1. When I was in 3rd grade, there was this one girl who started having to leave the classroom every day at the same time to go outside to spit up. Yes, spit up, as she called it. The teacher was visibly annoyed the first few times she went outside and finally had a talk with her in the hallway. After the talk, from that day forward, she allowed this girl to go outside to spit up without questioning it. When I asked her about it, she just said she had an upset stomach and that was it. Now that is when things started to get really weird. After a few days, one of the other girls in class started spitting up also. Then another and another until all the girls, about 12 in all, started going outside to spit up at exactly the same time every day. The teacher acted like nothing strange was going on. After about a month of this, it suddenly stopped like nothing had ever taken place. I am 54 years old and I remember this like it was yesterday. I still don't know what happened. I just figured it was some kind of mass hysteria. Update. 9/22/2014. I've talked to a few people about this, and here's the best explanation. I remember at around that time getting vaccinated for smallpox. I remember because they used an air gun that looked like a ray gun to inject the vaccine into our arms. I thought it was cool, but it did hurt a little. Anyway, there was a side effect of the vaccine that caused a condition known as lymphadenopathy. There we go. This would cause your lymph nodes to swell and make you feel like you needed to spit up all the time. That's probably what happened to the original girl. As for the rest of the girls, I don't know. They may all have had the same thing, or it could have been the mass hysteria effect since the original girl was sort of alpha. None of the boys that I know of experienced the same thing, although I did have a lymph node infection a few years later, which was cured by antibiotics. This is the best explanation so far. Other theories put forth in this story. Period. Does not seem likely since we were all around 8 years old. Bulimia. Possible. But I don't remember any of them having any problems other than this short incident. Getting out of class. Definitely probable. I asked my mother, and she guessed dental problems. I asked my brother-in-law, doctor of infectious disease specialist, and he gave the best answer. If I ever get in touch with any of these people, I'll report their interpretation of it all. That's all for now. You've got to figure this one out. Find old classmates on Facebook or something. I have to know. This sort of just reminds me of that music video where the guy's just lying down on the sidewalk and everyone's looking around wondering why he's lying down. They ask him, and he tells everybody you don't know what he's saying, and then everybody's lying down on the sidewalk. I guess this girl had some kind of pull or some sort of popularity. Weird, though. I wonder if it was all just a joke. Story 2. When I was around 8 or 9 years old, there was a girl in my neighborhood that hardly anyone ever saw outside of school. She was maybe a year younger than me. I tried talking to her a few times, and she was very, very shy. She was never allowed at other kids' houses. Reasonable, I guess. There were a lot of questionable people in our town. However, no one was allowed over at her house either. Not even in her yard or on her driveway. This was because, in her words, her parents didn't like kids. Okay. One friend of ours managed to see into her house a few times. Apparently, all the furniture was always covered in plastic and everything was dark. We went maybe a month without seeing her outside of school, which was normal. One weekend, a friend and I saw her walking down the sidewalk, and she told us that her father had passed away. Her mom told her that he started bleeding from the inside after he ate some crayons she didn't clean up, and that it was her fault for not cleaning well enough. She lived in the same house until after high school. She hardly ever spoke, and when she did, was just a whisper. She sort of seemed like a small child a lot of the time, with how she acted and pronounced words. If I weren't just a clueless kid then, I probably would have said something to someone. She blamed her father's death on her? Man, that's messed up. That is awful. Someone should have spoken up. Someone should have told another adult. How did crayons get inside the father? Even if she didn't clean it up, is he just prone to eating crayons and stuff on the floor? Nothing adds up there. That's kind of Wes Craven horror story creepy right there. Nope. Story 3. When I was about 12 or 13, I had this friend who lived in a house with her mother and 4 other sisters. One day, I went to her place while on my period and ended up using her washroom to change my tampon. I put the used one in the garbage can, which had a lid, completely wrapped up in toilet paper. Later in the night, right before dinner, we were all sitting at the table waiting for their mother when we suddenly all hear her screaming from the bathroom, "Who has their period? Who used a tampon?" She came rushing down, and all the sisters denied having theirs. I ended up sheepishly coming clean, to which she said, "And your mother lets you use tampons? Don't you know what that does to your body?" She then proceeded to make a whole dinner conversation out of why tampons are horrible for me and why they've ruined my purity forever, and bragged about how her daughters would never use anything so primitive. Needless to say, I never went there ever again. I thought it was so weird and what the helly, because the only way she would have seen my used tampon is if she had actually gone through the garbage, looking for something incriminating. The thing is, that's totally something this woman would do to try and find something to yell at her daughters about. I feel so bad for people who grow up with such controlling, monstrous parents. Granted, I am on the other side of this conversation. I don't know much about these types of devices or this type of event in a woman's life, but what else is she supposed to use? What's going to happen? It's not like from what I know, from what people have told me, it's not like peeing where you can hold it in. It's going to come out no matter what. So what's the alternate solution? Story 4. I grew up in a horrible estate in London called the Aylesbury Estate. I lived on the 12th floor of a high-rise block. I made friends with a boy called Nicky who was from Grenada, and he was black. He lived with his mother and father, or so I thought. I went round his place to play with a new fire engine I bought with birthday money. His house was so strange. Every single light in the house was red. Every single bulb. His mother's bedroom had a bolt lock on the inside for some reason. I saw his dad for the first time, but something was amiss. He wasn't black. He was 100% white. I was creeped out for a while. I went round his place again the following week, and the man he called Dad had changed. He was a completely different man, and the same thing happened again and again. Here's where it gets really messed up. His mother died, and he went into care. I asked my mom why he didn't live with his dad. It turns out his mother was a paid spicy companion and had convinced Nicky that his dad was a shapeshifter. She convinced her son his dad was a shapeshifter when they were just customers. This was about 40 years ago. I never saw Nicky again, sadly. Sounds like she was trying to protect him the best she could. Sad life making ends meet like that. Story 5. I grew up down the street from this family of 4. Mom, dad, son that was my age, and adopted son that was like 6 years younger than us. The son my age was pretty quiet and a little odd, but definitely fully functioning, which I feel like I have to mention to understand just how weird this was. One day, the mom approached me and asked if I could be a babysitter for them over the summer. Myself and the older son were both around 13 at the time. I assumed the son my age was busy or something and I was to watch his younger brother, but when I got there, both of the boys were there. About an hour in, I realized I'd been hired to babysit both of them. I would try to make it less weird by making it like the two of us were babysitting his brother together, but then he'd do weird stuff like ask if he could play his video games and if he could stay up a bit past his bedtime to finish a movie or something, and he addressed me with Mr. and then my first name. It was just really uncomfortable, especially having class with him once we were back in school. That's one way to give your kid the greatest inferiority complex the world has ever seen. Story 6. This is kind of mild, but was a what-the-hell moment when I was a kid. My best friend's family invited me to stay for dinner one night when I was around aged 11 or 12. We sat down to dinner and I asked if I could please have some milk or water with my meal. No one was allowed to drink anything while eating their meals. They all had to wait until their plates were clean before they could get a drink. What the hell? But I'm thirsty. She remained my best friend for years, but I never ate dinner at her house again. They also had 9 cats, one of which had a litter of 6 kittens. Looking back, it's amazing that they didn't have 100 cats because none of them were fixed. They were concerned about what the other cats would do to the kittens, which is understandable. So they kept the kittens in my friend's bedroom. This was probably not so unusual at first, but 2 years later, these kittens, now cats, had never left my friend's bedroom. Never. My friend actually moved up to the attic when her older brother moved out because everything she owned smelled like cat pee, and she was embarrassed. Basically, she had to give up her room so that her family could keep 6 cats hostage in there. I've seen a lot of situations where parents make room for their pets over their kid. In LA, I've seen a stroller that was a side-by-side stroller. Little dog in one side, baby on the other. It just progresses from there. It's also kind of messed up as far as priorities are. Story 1. Absolutely, without a doubt, one of my younger brother's friends from high school. Before he moved in with us, he seemed like a fine enough kid from a less-than-ideal home situation. His mom jumped from boyfriend to boyfriend and decided to move across the country midway through his junior year of high school. If he went with her, he would have ended up delaying his graduation by 6 months to a year, so my parents offered to let him stay with us. To frame the rest of the story, and to explain how much I dislike this kid, the TLDR is that he's the reason my dog is not alive. The kid was the worst type of house guest, incredibly possessive of his space, which he would basically bar whenever he was gone, even though his room was the only way for us to get to the hot water heater and boiler. He behaved like a neat freak, but was secretly a huge slob. He hid half-finished beers underneath the bathroom sink for a year, and the types of bugs that gathered pretty much ruined the lower floor of the house. He would sit on his bed and smoke so much weed and then completely pretend that it didn't happen, even when we found a lit bowl sitting next to him. He would ask my parents for money constantly. His mother decided he needed nothing at all since he wasn't her problem anymore, and he spent it on substances or on building a $1,000 gaming PC. Here's the awful John Wick Old Yeller bit of it all. He constantly ate chicken wings and would leave the bones just on the floor next to his bed, persistently, for months, even after my mom asked him not to. One morning, he dropped his 10-piece wing bones scattered around his bed like some awful Santeria ritual, and my dog found them. He was downstairs getting ready from school and saw my dog choking and just walked out to the bus. Didn't tell anyone. My mom found my dog's body about 30 minutes later. He never apologized, never even acted like it was his fault. He just stopped talking to everyone in the family and ignored us to our faces. He moved out in the middle of the night, stealing the mattress he was sleeping on to go to his aunt's house. 2 years later, we found him totally drunk, sleeping on our porch, covered in his own vomit. When I told him he had to go right now before someone found him and called the cops, he shouted, "Hate you, shrew at me," threw up all over the floor and my shoes, took his vomity jeans off on the deck, and wandered away. His name is basically a swear word in our house. It's been years, and honestly, I can't find it in myself to forgive him. He killed my Buster, and he didn't even have the decency to own up to it. Good deity, my dad, mom, myself would have literally tried to unalive him if he did that to one of our dogs. That's terrible. Do you think they were just lenient on him? Did they think that he would just be a good house guest to begin with? Or do you think they should have really laid some rules on him from the start? I mean, it sounds like they gave him more freedom than he really knew what to responsibly do with. What do you think? Story 2. Okay, so I know I'm stupid for even being in this situation, but I met a guy online. We were really clicking for a couple months when he asked if he could come see me. He tells me he doesn't have a car, so I'll need to pick him up at the bus station. That was fine with me, so I pick him up, expecting him to leave that night as we had planned. Turns out he had other plans. It was a Friday, and he hadn't purchased his ticket home until Tuesday and never told me how long he planned to stay. He was good looking, and the entire time he was there, he was on his phone. Took random pictures of my apartment and posted it on Facebook saying this was his vacation. I had a doctor's appointment the next day that I wasn't planning on him being in the way of. Against my better judgment, I left him there so I could go to my appointment. When I returned, I could hear him talking about some kind of strange business before I even hit the front door. He had also smoked a bunch of cigarettes in my apartment after being asked to go outside to do that. I was ticked, and that was the last straw. I told him we needed to talk, and that I wasn't feeling him in any sort of way, and that I wanted him out. He seemed shocked and kept insisting that he couldn't return home. There were no buses until Tuesday. It was Saturday at this point. He then said if I wanted to buy him a new ticket, he would go. I lied and told him I had bought a ticket and there was a bus leaving the station soon to his home 2 hours away. I got halfway to the bus station, and he claims he left his freaking gold clip in grill on my table in a paper towel, and he was not leaving town without it. I turned around to get it for him. Because he was so untidy and I was cleaning up after him, I had actually thrown away the grill in the paper towel and fished it out of the trash. We got to the bus station. He figured out I didn't buy a ticket and there were no buses going toward his home. I threatened to call the cops so he would get out of my car after an hour of arguing. Finally ditched that dude. Really didn't care what happened to him. Worst house guest ever. Again, you're meeting someone you've never met before. You need to set some ground rules. And yes, I know she admits that this situation was kind of her fault, that she should not have been in this, but you just need to talk and communicate ahead of time. When's your return ticket back? How long are you going to stay? And all of that stuff, because these people, he was just assuming, and she was just assuming too. A lot of assumption. Story 3. My aunt was going to stay with us for a couple months and find a job in our area. She's been living here ever since 2017 and only started looking for jobs in March of this year. And to be honest, I'm not fully sure she's actually applying to them because she hasn't had a single interview. She had a mental breakdown this past winter and thought her phone was being tapped, and we were all secretly recording her around the house. If she saw you holding your phone or near a phone, she'd rush out of the room. She came into my room uninvited once to check for recording devices in my smoke detector. At one point, she wasn't speaking to anyone and would write messages in a little notebook and burn them once they had been read. Sometimes she would start screaming for no reason. Sometimes it was hysterical, crying, and sometimes she'd just stand and stare. One time I found her standing outside my bedroom door at 1 a.m. She would also stay up until 3 or 4 a.m. and just stare at the muted TV in the living room with all the lights on. It got to the point where I legitimately did not feel safe in my own house, but it's not like we could tell her to leave and put her on the street. She refused help for a long time, but she's fine now and sees a psych regularly. But I realized that even without the mental illness, I still hate being around her. She's a know-it-all. She's constantly interrupting. She's ever present to the point that I can't have financial discussions with my mom in person, and I have to text her about it instead. She literally follows me around the house and will stand in the kitchen watching me as I make myself lunch. I can't stand it. And being someone who doesn't have a job, she literally never leaves the house. Even when I think I'm alone, she's here, just being very quiet. She's probably going to live here until I'm passed on, because my parents don't have the backbone to ask her to leave. This is the third time a house guest has significantly overstayed their welcome. Too long didn't read? My aunt overstayed her welcome by a year and counting, and had a paranoid breakdown over the winter that led to us feeling unsafe in our own home. Wow, this sounds awful for you. Hope it gets better soon. No, the sentence that sticks out in my mind is where he says, this is the third time a house guest has significantly overstayed their welcome. If the third person is this bad, I want to hear the stories about the other two. I want to know if they can post those two stories. Story 4. My aunt and her brother, let's call him AB, came over to visit my family. He was notoriously cheap. Like, he brought a rice cooker to a public bathroom to use the water and electricity to cook rice cheap. Although he was a millionaire. He's also been trying to set his daughters up with my brother, which is why he came over. We decided to buy 3 family-size Popeye sets and 3 gallons of OJ. Don't ask. Variation. For 8 people lunch, thinking we'll have at least 1 set left over for my aunt to bring home for my uncle because Popeyes was very new to our state at the time. Between my family of 4, we maybe ate half a box of chicken, half of the sides that came with it, and half a quarter gallon of juice. AB proceeds to eat 2 full boxes of family-sized Popeyes, ate all the sides that came with it, and drank 2 gallons of juice. His wife had to stop him because he was eating so fast that she thought he was going to choke, and AB was giving dirty looks to people who went back for a second piece of chicken. After all that was consumed, he went to our bathroom and completely destroyed our toilet. Poop everywhere. On the toilet seat, under the toilet seat, rim of the toilet, on the ground around the toilet, and on our bathroom vanity side next to the toilet. He also clogged the toilet and tried to unclog it, I guess. The plunger was covered in feces and toilet paper on the ground. He walks downstairs like nothing happens and didn't say anything. He then proceeds to eat half a platter of fruit I had just served. I'm guessing it was probably 3 oranges, 2 apples, and a quarter of watermelon. I was very taken aback when I went to the bathroom and had to discreetly grab my mom to show her. I end up having to clean it up because my mom didn't want to make a scene of it. Still a bit traumatized. He wouldn't leave until we ordered a huge dinner for at least 12 people and proceeded to take all the food once it was brought home. He was never invited back to our house. Story 5. My husband's ex-coworker/friend. He gave us a sob story about how he had nowhere to live, no car, money, etc. So we gave him our upstairs rent-free, a job, gave him access to our car, and gave him groceries. He'd been a roommate before and was amazing, but he found his new girlfriend and raving with 18-year-olds at 26. He quit the job after we were close to firing him. Thank the deities, because they'd be working out of town and he'd share a room with someone and blast music and turn on all the lights until 3 a.m. We found out he stole his dad's credit card to go see an out-of-town rave for him and his girlfriend. Didn't have a way there or back, just expected us to give him our car for the weekend. So after about a month of not doing anything to better his situation, we noticed this girl around more and more. Turns out he moved his girlfriend in without telling us and just expected us to include her in our generosity. We weren't impressed, and it got worse when I found empty pills in a drawer when I was looking for some documents that were in a drawer next to his bed. Didn't think this was a permanent situation at first. Then she very deliberately flashed her butt when she thought I couldn't see to my now husband while we were cuddling on the couch together. He nearly kicked them both out that night after that hogwash. I had to calm him down. We never told him about the incident. No freaking idea why, but my husband wouldn't let me, and we gave them a deadline to move out after that. I think the reasoning your husband followed regarding not telling his friend about his girlfriend flashing him her butt is that his friend would probably be depressed and more of a mess-up if he broke up with her and probably would try to use that to remain living with you.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.